Consistency is a must. Indeed. Ooh, I see a little pattern right there. Do you know what this is, boys? This little thing right here, this is called read-only. Also makes possible to finally have public properties without being afraid that they change over time. Exactly, RD. Immutability is very important. That being said, let's put this on full screen and get started. You guys excited about this? I am super excited. So that being said, let's just go.
Hello guys, while reviewing one project I saw this class cart DTO with the folder app DTO, and I decided to shoot this video explaining what DTO is, data transfer object, based on this specific example of cart. So I'll explain what that is, in what case you may want to use DTOs in your project, and this is especially useful for those of you who work solo as a freelancer or your own projects, and in the future you may want to get a job in a company, in a team. So for team environment and especially for bigger projects, DTO is one of those concepts that you would probably use quite often. So DTO is a general PHP class. It's not like PHP Artisan make DTO or something. You define it wherever you want. In this example, it's an app DTO specific folder, and then you define the...
I kind of like, to be honest, if I were to use DTOs, I would probably have them on their folder, okay? Just like I have actions within the actions folder or models within the models folder, I would probably have all my DTOs on my DTOs folder. Let me know what you think, or if you think there is any other way of organizing DTOs on the regular Laravel application.
Structure for specific object. In this case, it's a cart for a shop, for products cart, and then you define what variables, what properties are inside, the requirements for it to be required or not with question mark, and then you use that DTO everywhere in your project where something with cart is performed. Let me show you. So there is a service, session service, that puts the cart, the current cart of the user, of the shopper, in the session. So before the order is placed, the cart is in the session. So there should be some kind of structure ensuring that the session cart is in correct structure, right? So in the functions of getCart DTO and saveCart DTO, everywhere we see cart DTO as a parameter type hinted, return.
Now, one immediately advantage I'm seeing about DTOs, I don't know what you guys think, but just looking at this, if you have multiple arguments, it might get a little bit verbose. You know what I mean? Like, for example, if you are saving a cart DTO, having, for example, 3 arguments might be a little bit too verbose. So indeed, with the class DTO, we are not only reducing the number of arguments, but we are equally effectively encapsulating that state within an object reference, which is, a little bit more clean in my opinion. So that's a good thing. Also, if you were to get, the cart out of the session, if you have multiple arguments or multiple things you want to pull out from the session, actually using a DTO seems helpful in this case. So, here I do see the use case of this. It's actually interesting. Admiral is saying, and personally after 10 years of PHP dev, do not like suffixes for classes. If that's a DTO, you can know it by just tagging the class declaration. Well, sometimes, dude, sometimes, because effectively having a suffix will avoid collisions. I can give you an example. Imagine that you have a cart model as well, which might be the case in the future on this project. If you have a cart model, it will collide with a cart DTO if you weren't to use a suffix. So that's a use case for a suffix, okay? Let me know what you guys do in the chat. Do you use suffixes? I do. All the time, to be honest, except on my models. Chris is saying the following. Suffixes are also easier for searching. Such a good point, chat. You guys see? Imagine if you have, a cart and it's like not suffixed. You search for cart and you see like multiple files, which can get confusing. Indeed, good point. Personal preferences, the most important, dudes. Let's always embrace this. The most important is that those personal preferences come out of experience. Okay, that's the most important thing. Personal preferences are okay. However, they must come out of real-world experience building web apps, all right? Yoshi in YouTube just said something. Personal preferences as long as it is consistent. This is a very very important thing. The most annoying thing in the planet is that you jump into an existing application and you see a bunch of different preferences, someone using DTOs with suffixes, another guy using DTOs without suffixes, and someone else using value objects, and it just becomes a nightmare, you know what I mean? So regardless of the preference, just stick with it, along the project. So everything is like super consistent and, you can literally understand everything if you are jumping into that project. But also like if you want to build a new feature, you know exactly what to do. Consistency is a must. Indeed. All right, folks, let's just go.
A new object, empty object, and also here. So this is from and to session. Then
ooh, I see a little pattern right there. Do you know what this is, boys? This little thing right here, this is called the null object pattern, okay? It's actually a very good pattern, okay? So if you are getting the card DTO, but that card does not exist, what do? You have two options. You return null, which is not a good idea, or you return the object but empty. This is called the null object pattern, and it's so good. Because basically, the person receiving this DTO, this cart DTO, can treat the object just like normal. It doesn't need to check for null, which is very cool. So basically, we'll get like the cart DTO just empty. This is called the null object pattern. It's a very good pattern to implement, okay?
Then the next step is there's a livewire component, or you can consider that as a controller with private functions get and save card DTO, which are used in the add function of livewire component like this. So for example, if someone adds a discount, you first get the DTO, the current one, then you add a discount code, which is a property defined strictly here, string value, and then you save card DTO back to.
So the null object pattern, chat, is actually very cool here. You can immediately see it, okay? Just watch this. He is getting the card DTO without checking if the DTO is null. He doesn't have to, because we'll always receive one, okay? So this is called the null object pattern, one of my favorite patterns ever. Okay. A senior developer is also seen sometimes when making decisions like that. Sometimes, for example, I'm jumping to an existing code base and might not agree on the things I'm seeing. But for the sake of consistency, I'm going to just keep doing that. Otherwise, it will be just a nightmare. That's why sometimes you go to a front end and you see 3 different frameworks, or you see 4 different frameworks, things doing totally different. That's just a nightmare. Okay. Widely Slayer is saying the following: I like to keep DTOs as much as possible, as read-only as possible. That's a good one. Slayer is saying a very important thing, keeping the DTOs read-only. So what people can do, this is actually a very good point. I'm going to tell you one thing I probably would do, okay? I would, of course, declare strict types on top. You guys know me, big fan of declare strict types in every single class I have in my project, okay? Then I would go all the way down, namespace. I'm not quite sure if I would call this DTOs, but, doesn't sound bad either. So let's just do it. Then my DTO would definitely be a read-only class, okay? I would definitely make this class read-only. So it becomes immutable. It doesn't change. You can send this DTO across your project. That would never change, which is a very good thing to have, immutability in all your objects, okay? Then I would probably do the following. I would do this way, but I would have probably something like setters. But those setters will behave a little bit different from what you may expect, okay? I would probably do something like this. I would go all the way down. Let's just close this. And instead of having something like public function set cart ID, I would do this a little bit different. I would do like this. Public function with cart ID. And instead of returning the same object mutated, I would return a new object. So I would literally do this. This will return a new self with the existing user, with existing items, but with a different card ID. So this ensures immutability, and it's kind of a good thing to have. I'm gonna also explain you Yeah, I would do this. I would definitely do this. So this way the class can be read-only, immutable, and at the same time, every time I'm mutating the object, I would return a new one, which is a very good thing to have. What do you guys think about this? Would you guys also code DTOs this way, or I am losing my mind? What do you guys think about this? Yeah, mixing front-end frameworks is even worse than using jQuery, you know what I mean? Like the worst, like there is only one thing worse than using jQuery is using jQuery in another framework in the same project. That's like literally the worst outcome possible. Okay. Yes, every single with, by the way, I didn't complete it, but every single with would always return a new object. That's the way I would solve this problem. Okay. So even if you want to just increment one item, okay, you can have some nice goodies. You can have something like this. Add item, for example. This would never mutate the existing object, would literally just create a new object with that value added on top of it. You can make this really sexy. Don't tell this anyone, but you can make this really sexy just by coming here and doing something like this. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. This is called its plat or whatever this is called, but it's insanely sexy. What do you guys think about this? It is sexy, right? Come on, write it on the chat. What do you guys think about this? This is sexy, right? G3 is asking, why would you create a new object if you can just literally just modify an existing one? Well, you know, I can tell you one of the reasons why I would never do that. So here I have a function with the name compare cards. What this function does is compare these two cards that are provided, okay? And we are basically var dumping both within the function. And then what I'm doing here is creating the card 1 with the DTO, okay? And finally, I'm creating the card 2, which in my mind will have the same values as the card 1. And finally, I'm mutating the user ID, thinking that I'm doing this just to the card 2. And what's happening here is that once I do this, you will see that I have user 2 all the time. So how can I avoid this? Yeah, well, you can literally do this with user ID. And then you do something like this. Here we go. With user ID, let's call this user2. Okay, and this will still be the card 1. And now hopefully I have an error on line 36. Here we go. Clear my terminal and run again PHP. Almost. Items. Do I have items? Oh yeah, right here. Let's do user ID. Here we go, chat. We basically fixed the problem now by, creating a new object out of this function. So we no longer mutate the card 1, which is pretty cool. But again, this is the same problem as carbon dates in Laravel. Okay, carbon dates is actually even more clear for us because you think that you are adding days, but effectively you are mutating the previous date, which is 1,000 times worse. Well, exactly. If you make the class read-only, that's kind of the cool thing about making something read-only. If you do something like this, you can no longer, like even if you wanted to, if you try to do something like this, for example, this will fail. Okay, this is the kind of the cool thing about read-only. If you do something like this, you will see on the console, cannot modify read-only property. So even if you wanted to, or the developer of yours, this won't be allowed thanks to the read-only property. Well, thank you. Well, I hope the explanation was a little bit clear. It was kind of confusing, but I hope the explanation was kind of good. Let me know what you think. Yeah, on top of it, exactly like Slayer is saying, read-only also makes possible to finally have public properties without being afraid that they change over time. Exactly, RD. Immutability is very important. I haven't seen the back library, by the way. I don't know what that is.
Or not with question mark, and then you use that DTO everywhere in your project where something with card is performed. Let me show you. So there is a service, session service, that puts the current card of
Again, just to recap for those who are not here, I do see the value of using a DTO in this particular situation because instead of moving around 3 different arguments between methods, you are effectively encapsulating all those arguments in a single one, which is very interesting. On top of it, if you want to go, performance crazy, by using an object to encapsulate all of that state, instead of doing copies in memory, you are effectively just moving a reference to an object, which is also a very good thing if you have immutability. Okay, if you have immutability. Also, we noticed as well that we are using here the null object pattern, which is a very good thing to have, chat. A very good thing to have. A null object pattern allows you to basically, instead of returning card DTO and null, if you don't have the thing on the session, you return instead of null a new card DTO, which is empty. You really appreciate how well I explain things. Thank you, dude.
The user of the shopper in the session. So before the order is placed, the card is in the session. So there should be some kind of structure ensuring that the session card is in correct structure, right? So in the functions of getCardDTO and saveCardDTO, everywhere we see cardDTO as a parameter type hinted, returned a new object, empty object, and also here. So this is from and to session. Then the next step is there's a livewire component, or you can consider that as a controller with private functions get and save card DTO, which are used in the add function of livewire component like this. So for example, if someone adds a discount, you first get the DTO, then save into the database with DB transaction. And again, the parameter of that refresh order function is card DTO type hinted with the type. So all that is done to ensure that this specific structure is passed everywhere in your project, in the session, in the livewire component, and in the database. The alternative to DTOs is just an array. For example, the card would be array, and then for example here, instead of this get card DTO, you get session get array, then put some key in that array, like it would be card discount code or something. But then, which part of the application would ensure that this key is correct, that there isn't any typo, like for example, underscore.
We talked about this today. We talked about this. Literally, DTOs kind of ensure type safety. You can get some of that using array shapes in PHP Stan, but with objects, you get that natively and with a more performant way. So DTOs are indeed useful, okay? That indeed useful.
Somewhere by another developer in the future. So arrays don't have any validation layer in them. And that's why I emphasized in the beginning of this video that this is for teams and for bigger projects, because you write the code, for example, for that cart and shop for others to use in the future. That others may be yourself too. In 3 to 6 months, you will totally forget that code piece. But generally, this is kind of another layer of validation against any developer in the future, intentionally or unintentionally making a mistake in this data structure. So for example, if in the future someone makes this typo and then moves on with the code, see underlined immediately.
Yeah, with array shapes, you would also get that. But yeah, I do get the point. You know, you get native type safety, which is interesting. You also get some very good, editor support for this. PHP Stan would equally complain with array shapes as well. But, I get the point.
Warning by PHP Storm, property not found in card DTO. If you have array here, for example, and put this as a typo, no one would even notice. And also as a
You wouldn't notice if you are not using array shapes. By the way, if you don't know what is an array shape, is literally doing something like this. If you have, I'm not advising you to use this, by the way. I still think you should use a regular object for this kind of situations. But if you were doing something like this, you can effectively type this to specify the array shape of this object, okay? And PHP Stan, well, at least the editor should complain. I hope it does. It does complain. Here we go. You get, oh, you don't? 1 second. Entry. Oh, you do have. Here we go. PHP Stan offset whatever does not exist within the int. So you also get this type safety a little bit.
Complete, so you may not even want to type that manually. And of course, on top of that, if someone makes a mistake and still leaves that code, the automated tests should catch that, but should catch that not at the time of the order being placed, but immediately when this method is called, which means the error would be identified earlier and potentially fixed quicker. That DTO kind of validation on PHP level reminds me a little bit of validation in the form requests of Laravel. So this is one example from one of our courses, update, and you have request validated with form request class.
Kind of makes me think if the request object in Laravel doesn't have to DTO, or, you know what I mean, would be kind of useful to literally just translate immediately what is within the validated to a DTO. Undeniably, if we go here, we could do something like this, like request validated. This will return an array, and we could do something like this, like cart from the given array. We could potentially do something like this, which is interesting, but it would be kind of cool to have something like validated to DTO, and you would just provide a class. That would be even more sexy, something like this. I don't know if it makes sense. Let me know. You are doing a SAS with my starter kit in vibe coding? Well, with my starter kit is actually okay. Doing a SAS with vibe coding, make sure you validate the code. Don't forget that, all right? Do not forget that. I don't know what is back, by the way, Davey. I don't know what is back, okay?
And a little bit higher here. So this is the structure for validation, and no other fields would be saved in the database if they are not in the rules array. So if someone passes here in the update method some more data, they would not be passed to the database because they don't belong to the structure of the form request. It's just that the form request is used usually for validation with the controllers, and DTOs are the same thing but more globally, can be used throughout every place in your application. Also, it reminds me a bit of a TypeScript on the front-end level. So this is an example from another course of React.js. We define the structure, the interface for the task in the TypeScript file, and then we can use that in the React component, again ensuring additional validation, autocomplete, and more clarity for other developers.
Yeah, it's called a type safety. What Povilas is saying right now, clarification, information, you can say whatever you want. This is called type safety. And it is indeed a very good thing to have no matter the code you are writing. If your code is type safe, that means good things, okay? Always. We are far behind the time where we would write non-type safe code. That's from the past. Okay.
This is optional, and I have a separate video about TypeScript in the starter kit, so I will link that in the description below. But this is around the same message of extra validation.
So I do use Rust, by the way. Jader is saying Rust for the win. I do use Rust. However, realistically, as a guy who have done Rust, I've done a bunch of different languages. Realistically, Rust for web development is totally overkill. Okay? Rust for web development is totally overkill. Laravel data is not immutable. Interesting. While Animal Lover is saying, I can't believe it's you, Maduro. Yeah, that's me.
With more strict structure. So generally DTOs are used.
Pick and Flow is saying, with Rust, I can save 100 milliseconds. Probably me being generic and making kind of a joke. But I think, like, if you do the same things, like, for example, if you have an endpoint which accesses the database, but also, accesses the caching layer and does a bunch of different things, that endpoint on Rust or on PHP will take the same time. Because that's kind of the confusion when people talk about speed in languages, which is people talk about this very normal use cases like for eaches, which language is the best doing a for each loop, for example. Dude, it doesn't matter. Like, literally doesn't matter. The performance of a language is not seen from something like a for each. You need to apply that to the real world, okay? So you go to a language and you come with this problem. So I have a database, I have a caching layer, and I want to set up this problem. Which language is faster doing this? And obviously, Rust and PHP will have the same time because the bottleneck is never the language, is always these external components, things like network, databases, okay, always. And that's why no one is hiring Rust devs for web development. Exactly that. Okay, Sly Fox, exactly that. I think, Roberto99 is saying that the database is always the culprit. I think, to be honest, the culprit is always the network, man. Every single time I'm debugging problems with people's applications is always the network. After the network is the database. And after the database is the different million things. And the last thing in the puzzle is the database, which is so annoying. Lucas Porfirio is saying the language is good enough, just use it. Exactly, just go for it. And I think like all the mainstream languages are fast. Like literally every single mainstream language are fast. Ruby, Python, PHP, Rust, Go, whatever. All of them are super fast for the things we do, okay? That's why you don't like benchmarks. Exactly. Same thing. The benchmarks are just a waste of time. Exactly.
Used in the cases where some kind of object, more complex object than just one variable, is passed in multiple places throughout your application, especially, for example, like import and export from CSV, Excel, or external systems. But even within your own system, for example, you have controllers, Livewire components.
Coder is saying, I would love PHP to support natively concurrency in the future. I do understand the appealing of that feature, but effectively, when you work with web development today on Laravel, you just dispatch a queue job to accomplish things concurrently. You just dispatch a queue job and then you just answer to the user, and that queue job will be effectively processed concurrently while the answer is being transferred to the user. But I do get what you mean. You want that natively on the PHP language. I think that is like what people want and what makes sense to have. And I think we have all of that already in PHP. It's like saying, I want generics in PHP. Well, we don't have generics partially because PHP stand you can do generics, besides multi-line short closures. Dude, for real, I want so bad to have multi-line short closures. What is PHP fibers? Nobody knows. Okay, don't tell this anyone, don't clip this, but nobody knows what is PHP fibers. PHP fibers were released like a bunch of, months ago or whatever, but I don't think anyone knows what fibers are about. Even the ones who do, I don't think it's even possible to use that.
Then data in the session, then data in the database, and so on. So this is a very good case for data transfer objects, or sometimes they're also called value objects. So on our Laravel Daily, we also have a tutorial, premium tutorial, but I will still link that in the description below about value and data transfer objects.
Yeah, there is indeed this misconception between data transfer objects and value objects. In my opinion, you would use a value object within a data transfer object. Okay, which is a little bit different. So a value object would be something like, person name, or, something that would encapsulate a given native type. But a data transfer object is something like that transfers a bunch of different state. It's not related to a single state, basically. So, for example, money would be a value object because it encapsulates an amount of money. Or, for example, person age would encapsulate the rules about a given age, for example. Nobody can be -1 in terms of age, so that will be a value object, age, but, for example, a data transfer object would be this multiple information about the person, which you are about to change on the system.
And why would you need that? With another example. Also, as additional resource, you may take a look at the package Spatie
Laravel Data. A bunch of you guys mentioned Laravel Data. Oh, it's a package from Spatie, which works as a value object, as a data transfer object. I assume is that, right? Rich data objects, which can be used in various ways. Okay. Can you create them from an array? Well, this is kind of cool because you can literally do cart from and then give request validated, which is exactly what we talked about. Interesting. I need to give this a try for sure. Okay. All right, Chad. That was an awesome review. First video today, which was 6 minutes, but we took an hour to review this video. So let's clap for Povilas on DTOs in Laravel, example of another card. We need more people like Povilas in the community. He's doing a fantastic job. He's a legend on the YouTube space. So congratulations, Povilas, for this video. We are going to review another one from Povilas now. Yes, clap, 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 clap for Povilas. Let's do another one today, all right? So this was called DTOs in Laravel. Now we have to choose. Okay?